Alright, so in the last video we learned about the staff, which is what is the 5 lines and 4 spaces. That's called a staff. We've learned that there are 2 different kinds. We've got the staff, and then we can add the treble clef here or the bass clef here, and depending on which one we put in there, that's going to cause the notes to be higher or lower. So, for instance, if this note is on this space, and I have the same note on this space, but we have different clefs, it's going to make a different sound. It's going to be a different note, and it's going to be lower. So here is the treble clef, and then the bass clef. Treble clef, bass clef. And it's the same space on both staffs, or staves, okay? But because we have a different clef here, it's going to change the note, all right? And we'll get into more of that later on in this video. The next thing I want to talk about is why this brace is here. And this brace is here when we are joining 2 staves together to be played on one instrument. And usually you see that for a piano or a harp, and almost always it's going to be a piano, or at least more commonly it'll be for a piano, unless of course you're a harpist and you seek out a lot of harp music. So when these 2 staves are joined together, it is called a grand staff, and it means that again, both of these staves are meant to be played together at the same time. Not that you read this first and then go to that one. Okay. So speaking of grand staffs being for piano, what we're going to do now is go over to the keyboard, and I'm going to show you a little bit about the keyboard and how it's set up, or piano and how it's set up, and then we're going to introduce the musical alphabet using the keyboard as an example, and then we'll come back here. Alright, so we've been learning about sheet music, and we've been learning about rhythmic notation, and in the last video we were just introduced to the concept that there are more than one line. There's 5 lines and 4 spaces, which makes up a staff, and that there are actually 2 different kinds of staffs or staves. It's a treble clef and a bass clef. So what I want to do is I want to introduce this concept along with the keyboard, because the keyboard is a very visual instrument. All of the notes are laid out. You don't have to bend a string at a particular part, like on a guitar, where you have to press in on the string to get a particular sound out of it, change the different frets or anything. They only have 6 strings. Well, piano has all 88 keys. There's 88 keys on the piano, and that's pretty much the range of music that you're going to hear. I mean, you can go lower or higher than that, but ordinarily in most music you're going to have as low as that and as high as that, and that's pretty much the entire range that you're going to have. So I want to start with a concept on the piano. We had talked about this before, that music is full of patterns. All right, and you can very readily see this on the keyboard because it's broken up into 2s and 3s. So if we look at that, first of all, there's white keys and then the black keys. But if we look at the black keys, they're broken up into sections of 2 and 3 and 2 and 3 and 2 and 3. All right, there's only one note on the entire keyboard that is not a 2 or a 3, and that's the one way down here all by itself. Well, what happens here with this last key is that it would have been another set of 3, because you could theoretically go on indefinitely, 3 and 2 and 3 and 2. But they started with this first key, which is called an A, all right, and the A happens to be in a set of 3 keys, and we'll go into that here in a second. So anyway, this key by itself, you can either just not worry about it, learn about it later, or just understand that it's actually the same thing as the last in a set of 3. You have 2, 3, 2. This would have been another set of 3. Okay, so we have that pattern of 2s and 3s. A lot of people look at the keyboard and they think, "Oh my gosh, it's very intimidating." You look at it and you're going, "That's a lot of notes, and I don't know how I'm ever going to learn all of them." Well, really, again, it just comes back down to breaking it down into sections. Break it down into smaller chunks. So rather than look at this entire keyboard, you really only have to understand that there are only 12 keys. and they're in between my hands right now, and I've got 7 of them that are white, so these 7, and then these 5 which are black. So you've got 12 keys altogether. And if I take my hands and I move them down, you'll see, again, that it's the same 12 keys, and it looks exactly the same. 3 white keys, 2 black keys, 4 white keys, 3 black keys. So, 12 keys, 12 keys, 12 keys, 12 keys. Alright, I know I just blew your mind with that, so take a breath, pause, go get some coffee, relax, because I'm sure that your mind just exploded and your brain is on the wall right now. So, 12 keys, alright? Very simple. I could even do it with this pattern and start here, if that helps you for some reason. 12 and 12, alright? So, that being the case, we're going to use 7 letters in music and no other letters than that. You already know these letters from the alphabet. It's A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Alright? And we start on the bottom with an A. On a full-size keyboard, we start on the bottom with an A. And go B, C, D, E, F, G. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. We don't go to H after G. It repeats. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. 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 Over and over again. Okay? So, if you want to, you can pause the video now if you have a keyboard. And if you don't worry about it. But if you have a keyboard and you'd like to try this, or piano, you can pause the video and try that. Just play every key and say it out loud. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and so on. Alright? So, what if you don't want to count all the way from A and find a C up here? Well, that's where the beauty of the black keys comes in, because they're set up in a pattern in such a way that you can figure out where one C is in relationship to the black keys, and that will tell you where all the other C's are. So for instance, this note here is a C, and it's just to the left of 2 black keys. So 2 black keys here, and then find the white key to the left of 2 black keys. That is a C. Alright? So anywhere else on the piano that there's a set of 2 black keys, I can go to the left of that and find a C. So here's 2 black keys, that's a C. Here's 2 black keys, that's a C. Here's 2 black keys, that's a C. Alright? So the same thing holds true if you find another note. So we know where a C is, and the C is behind 2 black keys. So if we go up from there and say, okay, this is C, so then one to the right must be a D. Alright, so I'm looking at this. I found this D, and I know that this D is in between 2 black keys. Right there. In a set of 2. Not in a set of 3, but in a set of 2, it's in between the 2 black keys. So I know anywhere else on the keyboard that there's a set of 2 black keys and it's in between the 2, that must also be a D. And that one is a D. And that one is a D because they're in a set of 2. Now this one is not a D because it's in between 2 black keys, but that's the set of 3. So that's going to be a different note than D. In fact, this one is a G. So the same thing applies. If you see this G and you see, okay, it's the first one inside a set of 3 black keys. So here's the inside notes, these 2. In a set of 3, so there's a G, so you can find another G anywhere on the keyboard. So there's a set of 3, and here's a G. Here's a set of 3, and there's a G. So in this manner, you can find all of the letter names on the keyboard. Now, that doesn't tell us about how to name the black notes, but that's not something that we're going to get into right now. We're going to do that in future videos.
Alright, so we've been introduced to the musical alphabet, and we got a brief introduction to the keyboard, so I went ahead and pulled up my nifty keyboard here. And what I have done, as you can see, is laid out a bunch of notes in a row, and you can see that they're very neatly going up in a line, and that's because every note is the very next note. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Just like we were talking about, there's an alphabet, and then it repeats. So from G we go back to A, and we go B, C, D, E, F, G, and then back to A, and it repeats again here and here and here. And here, and here. And what I have done is laid out every note, every white note that you see on the piano here on the staff, because I wanted to give you an idea of how low and how high we can actually go with the music on the page. The point here is not to scare you with all of these lines. Like, I don't want you to be concerned about all these lines right now. These lines just mean that you have gone off of the staff and you had to draw some more lines to understand exactly where we were. But we'll get into that later on. You don't really need to know about that right now. Right now, I'm just giving you a broad overview. So I'm going to let this play, and as it's playing, you're going to see each of these keys light up. I'm going to let it play twice, and the second time I'm going to say the notes that are being played as they're being played. And there's one other thing I wanted you to note, which was here in the middle, I went to C on the bass clef, and then I started with the same note in the treble clef. So this is actually the same note written in bass clef and then in treble clef. So here's C, and then here's C, the same note. You can hear that it's the same note in treble clef. Okay, so you're gonna see that also here. So that's gonna be played twice, and I just wanted you to be aware of that. So here we go. All right, so that was pretty much the entire spectrum of notes that we typically use in music. You'll notice that all of the notes were just the white keys on the piano. As we discussed earlier, we're not going to go into the black keys just now. We'll talk about that later. So I'm going to play this one more time, and I'm going to say the notes as they're being played, just so you get another idea of it, and then we'll move on. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, 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 C. So here I have laid out the notes based on the lines and spaces in both the treble clef and the bass clef. All right, and I have colored the lines for treble clef in blue to correspond with the notes down here, and the lines in bass clef in green to correspond with the notes down here. So hopefully you can easily see what's going on. One thing that we haven't talked about yet, which I'll just go ahead and mention now, is that just because this is treble clef here on a staff doesn't mean that you can't put a clef later like we did here and change it to a bass clef. That does happen quite a lot, actually. You can see here, this is just basically an easy way to learn the lines and spaces, the names of all the notes. And I would focus on one clef at a time. So do your treble clef first, going through F, A, C, E, and then E, G, B, D, F, and then go into the bass clef. So we have some notes down here. The spaces in the treble clef from the bottom to top spell the word face. So we have F, A, C, E, right? So that just spells the word face. So that's a pretty easy way to remember the spaces going from the bottom to the top. And then the lines are E, G, B, D, F. So we have an acronym for that, which is Every Good Boy Does Fine, is usually what you hear as far as the acronym goes. You can make up your own if you'd like. That makes it easy to remember what the note names are for those lines. But ordinarily we say Every Good Boy Does Fine is a good way to remember that. So moving over to the bass clef, we have the spaces in the bass clef. From bottom to top, they are A, C, E, and G. And a good acronym for that is All Cars Eat Gas, or All Cows Eat Grass, if you prefer. And then in the lines, we have G, B, D, F, A, which is Good Boys Do Fine Always. So what's more important than learning the notes on the page, I mean, as far as the names of the notes, is really how they interact with each other and what sound they make and how far you're going from one note to another. So if I go from here to here, automatically, I know how far that is because I've been reading music for a long time, and so I know what this will sound like, and I know what from here to hear will sound like. And you'll be able to know what that sounds like too, because it's Mary Had a Little Lamb, so I'm sure you've heard that a million times. So if we play this, it sounds, Mary had a little lamb, little lamb, little lamb. Mary had a little lamb whose fleece was white as snow. So we knew what notes to sing based on the first note that we got. So we know that after that note we go down and then back up. And before we had this discussion, I mean, you probably didn't know how you knew that. It's probably because you've heard it a million times, right? So you're already relying on your ear to be able to sing a song that you've known for a long time. The point here is what is the distance between one note to the next note, all right? And the more you read and practice sheet music, the more you will be able to hear it in your head just by looking at the notes. So to further illustrate this point, I'm going to take this entire passage, I'm going to move every note up by one step. So now we have a different starting note. It's here, instead of here. Now it's so we've taken it up just a little bit, but because we moved that starting note up, and because Mary Had a Little Lamb is a fixed melody and a fixed song, and we know what the melody is, then all the other notes had to come up as well. So I don't even know necessarily what notes these are just yet. I mean, we're just now learning the note name, so you probably can't off the top of your head tell me, that that's an A or that's a G or whatever. The point here is to look at it graphically and say this goes down and then back up and then it stays on the same note, and then it goes down again and stays on the same note, and then it goes up and then it skips. Up until then, we'd had a line to a space to a line, so we know those notes are right next to each other. And then here is a little further than that because it skips from a line to another line. All right? So the other part is that we have this song in our memory, so we're listening to it by ear. So now that it's starting on this higher note, I can sing that. Mary had a little lamb, little lamb, little lamb. Mary had a little lamb whose fleece was white as snow. And I could do this again and take it up a little bit farther, in fact, a lot farther. This is going to be really high, but I'm going to try it anyway. Mary had a little lamb, little lamb, little lamb. Mary had a little lamb whose fleece was white as snow. So that's a lot higher, actually, than it was. In fact, it's a full, what's called a whole fourth higher. And we'll get into that right now. Why am I using words like step and fourth? Well, these words are what we use to describe what are called intervals. All right? An interval is the space or distance between two notes. And in order to illustrate this point, I'm going to bring on the keyboard. And in fact, from now on, as much as I can, I'm going to leave the keyboard on the screen because it's another visual anchor for you to understand sheet music. And on top of that, it'll give you a basic understanding of piano. So if you wanted to continue with your musical studies and start learning an instrument like piano, then this will give you a little foundation of the notes and all of that. So an interval is the musical distance between two notes. And I'm going to demonstrate this on the piano. I was using the word step earlier. There's actually two different kinds of step. There's a half step and a whole step. So an interval is the musical distance between two notes. A half step is the smallest interval. So let's have a look at this keyboard here, and I'm going to play on my physical keyboard, and it'll light up for you. So we're going to look at this section of notes right here. along with their black keys. And what I want you to notice is what I just did was going up by one key at a time. Let's focus on the top half of the keyboard for just a second. So I've taken it down to the bottom of the screen, so you can see now that if you're going from left to right, most of the time you're going from a white key to a black key to a white key. And every now and then, here and here, you come across two white keys that are right next to each other. Okay, so anytime you have the keys that are right next to each other going from one to the next one, it's called a half step. So if I'm going from that C to that C sharp, which we'll get into in a minute, sharps and flats, get into the black keys, that's a half step. If I go from here to there, that's a half step. If I go from here to here, that's a half step. If I go to here to there, half step. And all of those were white to black to white to black to white. Here I have a white to white key, and that is still a half step. It's one note to the very next note. All right. So I'm going to bring the full keyboard back up on the screen. And I'm just going to play a few more random half steps for you to give you the idea. All right. So a whole step is twice that. It's basically when you take a note and then you skip a note. So instead of playing that C sharp, I'm going to play the D. So now I'm playing C and D. So I've skipped that one and I'm playing these two. That's called a whole step. So from here to here is a whole step, because you can readily see that there's a black note in between there that I skipped. And from here to here is a whole step. It's a black note in the middle that I skipped. And one black note to the one that's right next to it. So these two, those two notes is a whole step. And you can see readily that there's a white key in the middle that I've skipped. So there to there is a whole step. 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 All right. It's not a whole step when you go from here to here, because you can see that there are two white notes in the middle. So this is actually more than a whole step, because there are two white notes in the middle. In fact, if I just wanted to skip one note, I'd have to play this one, skip that one, and go to that one. And now we've got a whole step there. So there's an instance where we have a whole step, which is a white key to a black key. All right. Same thing happens if I start from this B here. I can go up a whole step, and that I would have to skip this C and go here to the C sharp. So now I've got B to C sharp. That would be a whole step. So A to B is a whole step. B to C sharp is a whole step. Okay. If I go E to F sharp, that's a whole step. All right. So half step, whole step. All right. I'll play each of those one more time and let you hear more clearly what they sound like. So this is what you play in half steps. And this is what it sounds like in whole steps. All right, so that's half steps and whole steps. Now, since we've just learned about half steps and whole steps, let's use a couple of new terms called sharp and flat. Now, you've been hearing me say sharp and flat for a little while, and I'm going to explain what they are. A sharp is when you go up by 1/2 step. All right, a sharp is when you go up by 1/2 step. So if I play a C and I wanted to go up 1/2 step, I'd be here on this black note, and that's called a C sharp. Okay, a flat is when you go down by 1/2 step. So if I'm on the C and I go down by 1/2 step, I'm now on the note that we have previously been calling B, but we can also call it C flat. All right, so there's a C, you go up 1/2 step, there's a C sharp. You go up another 1/2 step, we're at D. If we're at D and we want to go to D flat, we'd have to go down 1/2 step. It'd be D flat, which we just called C sharp. So each one of these notes can actually have two names associated with it. So this can be a C sharp and it can be called a D flat. All right. This concept, by the way, of there being two names associated with each note is a concept called inharmonics, and I've spelled it out for you there. And it's not imperative that you know that word, but I just thought I would throw it out there. It's a word called inharmonics, and it means that there are two names for each note. That's just a term for that concept. Okay, so we have a C sharp, which is also called a D flat. So C to C sharp, and then D to D flat, same thing. So if I wanted to go to this note, then I could call that one of two things. That could either be an F sharp, or it could be a G flat. Okay, so that is sharps and flats, and we're going to get more into that later, but I just wanted to introduce you to that concept. So that's going to be it for this video, and be sure to go now to the practice video and run that at least once before you go anywhere else.